Have you ever stood in your own kitchen, staring at a sink full of dishes after a long day helping someone else and thought, when was the last time someone did something for me? Not because you expect grand gestures, not because you're keeping score, but because deep down there's a quiet ache, a kind of emptiness that comes from always showing up and realizing no one really shows up for you. Maybe it started small. You offered a hand, gave your time, opened your wallet, kept the peace. You were the steady one, the dependable one, the just call me if you need anything one, and they called again and again. But lately, you've started to notice something. When you need help, the line is suddenly quiet. When you try to share your feelings, the subject gets changed. When you speak from the heart, it feels like you're speaking into a void. That's a lonely place to be, especially when the people you're giving to are the ones you love most, your children, your family, even old friends. You wonder, do they even notice? Or have I just become the background noise of their lives? It's okay to admit it. It's not weakness to feel disappointed. It's not bitterness to want reciprocity. It's human. And after 60, when you've already given so much of yourself, that yearning for mutual care only grows stronger. But here's the hard truth wrapped in tenderness. If you're always giving and getting nothing back, you're likely stuck in a pattern that's asking too much of your soul and giving too little in return. And some of that pattern, soft as it started, is being kept alive by habits that feel like kindness, but are slowly erasing you. Like Laura, a grandmother of 4, who spent years organizing family gatherings, watching the kids, lending money when times were tight. She never asked for anything in return. That was her way of showing love. But over time, her daughter Nicole stopped saying thank you, stopped asking if she was okay. It became expected. One day, Laura mentioned that she was feeling overwhelmed, and Nicole rolled her eyes. "You always make things dramatic," she said. That's when Laura realized her kindness had turned into currency, and she was being spent. Because that's what happens when we don't set limits. When we confuse love with endless availability, when we mistake being needed for being valued. It's not that people are cruel. Sometimes they're just used to your selflessness. They've learned, quietly, that you'll always say yes, that your needs will always come last, that you won't walk away, no matter how little they give. And so they stop giving, not out of hate, but out of habit. That's what happened to Brian. His son, Jason, had lost his job and moved back in temporarily. Brian was glad to help. But a few months turned into a year. Brian paid the bills, cooked the meals, even let Jason borrow his car. When Brian asked about a plan, Jason shrugged. "I'm figuring it out." But he wasn't. He was coasting because Brian had made it easy to forget that giving should have a rhythm, not a drain. And every time Brian tried to bring it up, Jason would get defensive. "I thought you wanted to help." That's the trap. You help out of love, but it turns into expectation. And when you try to pull back, suddenly you're the one made to feel guilty. So you stay quiet. You keep giving. You suppress the frustration. You convince yourself that this is just how families are. But deep down, something in you starts to dim. You begin to feel resentful, then ashamed for feeling resentful. You begin to dread the phone ringing. You begin to feel like you've been reduced to your usefulness. That's not love. That's emotional labor dressed up as devotion. And the hardest part, you taught them how to treat you, not by doing anything wrong, but by doing too much. By never saying no, by never asking for your needs to be seen, by believing that the more you gave, the more they'd understand. But love doesn't work like that. Giving doesn't always lead to gratitude. Sometimes it leads to entitlement. That's why this chapter of life, the one you're in right now, has to be about something different. Not about becoming harder, not about shutting down, but about becoming clearer, about choosing to stop doing the things that drain your light. Even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it's hard at first, even if people push back. Because what you deserve, especially now, after all you've given, is not more silence. It's mutual respect. It's care that flows both ways. It's love that sees you, not just what you provide. And to move toward that, you may need to stop saying yes when your body is tired. Stop offering money when you're met with silence afterward. Stop pushing down your own feelings just to avoid conflict. Stop rescuing people who never learned to swim on their own. You don't have to become cold. You only have to become honest. It's okay to say, "I can't do that anymore." It's okay to say, I need support too. It's okay to say, I don't feel appreciated right now, and it's more than okay to rest, to say no without guilt, to expect that love, at the very least, feels safe and reciprocal. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're simply beginning to understand that pouring from an empty cup only leads to more emptiness. And the good news is, you can stop. You can stop giving to the point of exhaustion and start giving from a place of choice, not obligation. You can begin to reclaim the sacred balance between offering and receiving. And in doing so, you begin to find your way back to dignity, to clarity, to peace. There's a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when you finally realize you're not tired because you're old. You're tired because you've been giving on empty, not just once, but again and again. And somewhere in that pattern, you stopped being a person and started becoming a role. The supporter, the provider, the one who always has it together, the one who never says no. But under all of that, beneath the smiles, the helpfulness, the constant availability, there's a person with feelings, with needs, with limits. And sometimes, those limits get so pushed, so ignored, that they stop even feeling like yours. That's what happened to Melissa. She was the kind of mother who answered every phone call, watched her grandchildren on short notice, gave rides, paid for groceries, covered bills, stayed quiet when her kids snapped at her. She told herself it was love, that this is what mothers do, that her sacrifices made their lives easier. But one evening, after a long day of babysitting and no thank you, she sat on her porch and just wept. Not loudly, not for attention, just a silent stream of tears for the part of her that no one noticed anymore. That's the cost of overgiving, not just exhaustion, but erasure. And what's worse is that people rarely notice they're taking too much. They assume you'll bounce back, that you'll always be there, that you don't mind, because you've never said otherwise. You train them, softly, without even meaning to, and it's no one's fault. Not really. But it is your responsibility to decide when the pattern has gone too far. Because if you keep trying to be everything to everyone, you will become nothing to yourself. That's what Brian learned. After months of housing his adult son and covering his expenses, Brian finally sat down and looked at his own finances. He realized that his retirement savings were dwindling, not because of emergencies, but because of habit. Every time Jason said, "Can you help?" Brian said yes, until his own future was compromised. And when he brought it up, Jason said, "I thought you wanted to. You never said anything." And that's the key. People don't stop crossing your boundaries. They stop when you start enforcing them. But boundaries are hard, especially when you've built your identity on being the one who never needs them. The idea of saying no to your children, to your siblings, to your friends feels selfish, like turning your back, like closing a door. But here's what boundaries really are. They are the way we stay kind without becoming resentful. When you keep giving past your limit, kindness turns bitter. Help starts to feel like a burden. And eventually, even the people you love begin to feel like obligations. That's not what you want. And it's not what they want either. It takes courage to stop overextending yourself. To say, "I love you, but I need space." Or, "I care, but I can't do that right now." Or even, "I feel unappreciated," and that hurts. These aren't attacks. They're truths. And when you speak them gently but firmly, something starts to shift. Amber, for instance, was the strong one in her group of friends. Everyone came to her with problems. She offered rides, emotional support, favors. But when she went through her own health scare, no one showed up. Not one person asked how she was doing. She didn't even get a card. That moment opened her eyes, not just to her friends' neglect, but to her own silence about her needs. So she stopped. Not cold turkey, but gradually. She didn't jump to say yes. She didn't follow up with people who ignored her. She let the distance grow and found peace in the space it created. And in that peace, she began to see herself again. Because when you stop doing too much, you finally get to feel enough. You get to say, "I've done my part." You get to rest without guilt. You get to stop apologizing for being human. You're not here to be everyone's safety net. You're here to be you. And that you, the one with preferences, limits, dreams, and softness, deserves as much care as anyone else. Maybe even more, because you've spent so long forgetting that. And here's something else. When you begin to honor yourself, some people will be confused. They'll say you've changed, that you're pulling away, that you're not as available. Let them. Let them be uncomfortable while you become whole. Because the people who truly love you deeply, without condition, will adjust. They may not say it right away. They may resist at first. But eventually, they'll see that doesn't mean you love them less. It means you love yourself, too. And that love balanced, healthy, rooted is what your relationships have been missing all along. It's not about doing less. It's about doing what actually honors you. It's about choosing to stop showing up in ways that leave you empty. So when your phone rings and you're tired, let it ring. When someone asks for something you don't want to give, say, "I'm not available." When your heart aches from being overlooked, say it aloud, even if just to yourself, because it matters. You matter, and no relationship worth keeping will ever demand that you disappear. You've spent enough of your life proving your love. Now it's time to practice it by including yourself in the circle of care. There's something deeply powerful that begins to stir inside you the moment you stop giving out of fear and start giving from choice. Not because someone expects it, not because you're afraid they'll pull away, but because you want to, because your cup is full enough to share, not because someone's reaching for it again when it's already empty. That's the shift. It's not about becoming less generous. It's about becoming more intentional. And when you start living that way, everything around you begins to change, not because others suddenly become better, but because your presence becomes different. You no longer walk into a room hoping to be needed. You walk in already knowing that you matter. Melissa, the grandmother who once cried on the porch after giving too much, started making one small change. She created a simple rule. If I feel resentment rising in my chest, I pause before saying yes. That pause became everything. It gave her space to ask herself, am I doing this because I want to, or because I'm afraid of what they'll think if I don't? Sometimes she still said yes, but it came from clarity, not compulsion. And little by little, her energy changed. Her children noticed. They didn't say anything at first, but they asked less. And when they did ask, they paused too, waited, respected her space more. It wasn't because she lectured them. It was because she had stopped teaching them to rely on her by default. And that's the quiet gift of living your worth. You begin to receive the respect you stopped begging for because you started showing it to yourself. Brian, after finally drawing a line with his son, began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He still loved Jason, still helped when it made sense, but no longer at the expense of his dignity or his future. He began taking care of his home with more attention. He started walking each morning, just because it made him feel alive. He started writing again short stories he never shared with anyone but himself. He told me once, "It's strange. I thought drawing boundaries would make me feel isolated, but it made me feel anchored, like I belonged to myself again." And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Reclaiming that sense of belonging to yourself. For years, maybe even decades, you've poured yourself into others, into their needs, their goals, their comfort, but somewhere in that giving, you forgot the shape of your own soul, forgot what you sound like when no one else is telling you who to be. Now, you're remembering. And as you remember, you begin to experience something beautiful. Giving no longer drains you. It becomes joyful again. When Laura chose to stop overextending herself, she thought her daughter would become distant. And for a while, she did. There were fewer calls, less chatter, but something unexpected happened. When Nicole did reach out again, it wasn't to ask for something. It was to talk, to check in, to share a moment. And Laura noticed those moments. Fewer, but deeper, fed her soul in a way the constant obligations never did. Because when you stop giving from depletion, you make room for true connection, not performance, not guilt, just presence. That's what you deserve now. Not just to be useful, but to be seen. Not just to be praised, but to be valued. Not just to be around, but to be cherished. But none of that can happen if you're still hiding behind endless giving, still afraid that saying no will make you less lovable, still convinced that your worth is tied to how much you do. Your worth has never been in what you give. It's in who you are when you stop giving and the room is still quiet, and you still stand tall. You don't need to yell. You don't need to explain yourself over and over. You just need to embody your truth. Say things calmly and clearly. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. I need time to myself. I've decided to do things differently. The people who truly love you will listen, and the ones who don't, they were never listening in the first place. That's hard, but it's also freeing because you're no longer living in reaction. You're no longer on autopilot, giving until there's nothing left. You're living from intention, and from that place solid, steady, rooted, you begin to attract a different kind of experience. Conversations that go two ways. Time that feels shared, not taken. Relationships that breathe, rather than pull. And when you do give, it's not with exhaustion. It's with joy. You cook because you want to nourish someone. You say yes because it's a full-hearted yes, not a tired, pressured one. You give your time because you've chosen to, not because you feel guilty if you don't. That's the freedom you've been yearning for, not to stop loving others, but to love without losing yourself. And when you live that way, something else returns. Your joy. It's subtle at first, a little more light in your eyes, a little more laughter in your voice, a little more ease in your body when you sit down at the end of the day, knowing you honored yourself. And the people who are meant to be part of your life, they'll notice, they'll come closer, not to take, but to be with you, because your presence has become a place of peace again, not just for them, but for you. That is what it means to reclaim your life, one gentle no and one powerful yes at a time. If you've stayed with me this far, I want to take a breath with you right here, in this moment, and say, thank you, not just for watching, but for honoring yourself, for choosing to sit with these words, even when they stirred something painful, even when they made you remember all the times you gave and felt invisible in return. That's not a small thing. That's the beginning of coming home to yourself. Because the truth is, many people go their whole lives giving everything away: time, energy, attention, money, forgiveness, hoping that one day all of it will circle back in the form of love, appreciation, respect. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes, the people you give most to are the ones who learn to take you for granted, not out of cruelty, but because that's what routine giving creates: invisibility cloaked in generosity. And you start to believe that's just how it is. You start thinking, maybe they're just busy. Maybe I shouldn't need anything. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe it's selfish to want someone to give back. But no, it's not selfish. It's human. You are allowed to want reciprocity, to long for care, to expect your efforts to be seen not just in words, but in actions. And when it doesn't happen, when the giving becomes one-sided, it's not your job to give more. It's your invitation to give differently, to shift the focus from proving your love to protecting your peace, to stop handing out parts of yourself that you haven't even given to yourself yet, to stop being the one who's always okay when you're not. That shift won't be easy. It may feel unnatural at first. You might find yourself doubting, wondering if you're being cold, feeling tempted to go back to the old patterns. Say yes when you want to say no. Stay silent when you want to speak. Offer help even when your soul is crying out for rest. But I promise you this: each time you choose to pause instead of please, each time you ask yourself what you need before reaching for someone else's comfort, you get stronger, not harder, not colder, just clearer. And from that clarity, something beautiful grows. Joy returns, not the kind that depends on how others treat you, but the kind that rises up from within. Peace expands. You begin to trust yourself again. You stop resenting the silence and start savoring it. And slowly, the weight you've carried, the expectation to always be available, always be kind, always be needed, begins to lift. You stand up straighter. You smile with less effort. You begin to feel seen, even if only by the reflection in your own mirror. That's more than enough. Because when you see yourself fully, you stop chasing others to do it for you. And here's the beautiful surprise. Some of them might finally begin to notice. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy has changed. You're no longer trying to earn love. You're embodying it. You're no longer bending for approval. You're walking in self-respect. And that presence, that calm, grounded, loving presence is the most magnetic thing in the world. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to beg. It simply is. And those who love you truly will rise to meet you there. And those who don't, let them go. Not with anger, with grace. Because letting go isn't rejection. It's redirection away from what drains you, toward what sustains you. You've earned this peace. You've spent decades loving others. It's not selfish to want some of that love to flow back into your own life. So if this message spoke to you, if something in your chest softened or stirred while listening, I want to ask you something. What have you stopped doing recently that brought you peace? Or what do you wish you could stop doing, but haven't found the courage yet? Share it in the comments, not because you owe anyone an explanation, but because your story might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. And if this message made you feel seen, if it reminded you that your worth was never about how much you gave, I'd love to stay connected. Click subscribe so we can keep walking this journey together. You're not alone. Not anymore. This space is yours, a place to breathe, to reflect, to remember that your softness is not weakness, and your limits are not failures. They are the gateway to living with dignity. So tonight, when you're alone with your thoughts, I hope you speak gently to yourself. I hope you say, I'm proud of how much I've given, and I'm allowed to stop now. I hope you rest, not because you earned it, but because you deserve it. And I hope you wake up tomorrow knowing this truth. The love you give to yourself will teach the world how to treat you. And you're worth learning from. Take care of your heart. Protect your peace. And keep choosing yourself quietly, bravely, one moment at a time. We'll talk again soon.